Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a podcast exploring the ideas, pressures, and possibilities shaping how we learn, lead, and grow. I'm Corey Alderdice. For over 20 years, my work has lived at the intersection of gifted education, leadership development, and school culture, supporting students as they find their strengths, educators as they stretch their thinking, and schools as they build pathways that expand opportunity. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice.
Last episode, we began our summer school series, College Before College, by exploring how dual enrollment and early college programs have rapidly moved from the margins of education into the mainstream. What was once viewed as a relatively specialized opportunity for academically advanced students has increasingly become a normalized expectation across much of the country. But today, I want to move toward what I think is the deeper and perhaps more uncomfortable question sitting underneath that expansion. Are we beginning to mistake the accumulation of college credit for actual learning? Because one of the most important ideas embedded within the recent NASEP report Beyond Rigor is that the argument of educational systems having become increasingly and heavily focused on measuring participation and accumulation, while paying far less attention to the quality and the meaning of the experience itself. And honestly, I think that observation extends far beyond dual enrollment. We live in a moment where education increasingly rewards visible markers of advancement. Students who accumulate AP courses, industry certifications, concurrent credit, leadership positions, research opportunities, service hours, digital badges, micro-credentials. The modern student resume has become almost shockingly dense. And yet at the same time, I think many educators sense that some students are moving through all of this with remarkable strategic sophistication, while not always having enough space to genuinely explore who they are becoming. It's not a criticism of students, by the way. In many ways, they are responding rationally to the environment adults have created around them. We've built educational systems that increasingly incentivize optimization. Students understand very early now that admissions processes are competitive. College costs are high, time matters, efficiency matters, strategic positioning matters. And so many students are becoming extraordinarily skilled at navigating educational systems in ways that maximize outcomes. But there's an important difference between becoming highly skilled at navigating systems and deeply engaging with learning itself. And I think that distinction matters enormously. One of the phrases from the report that's stayed with me was this idea of a quality lottery. Two students may both graduate high school with 30 college credit hours or a year. Now, on paper, those students appear to have achieved something very similar. But the actual experiences underneath or alongside those credits may be radically different. One student may have experienced deeply engaged teaching, thoughtful advising, strong institutional partnerships, meaningful classroom discussion, and coursework that genuinely stretched their thinking. Another student may have encountered fragmented instruction, weak support systems, inconsistent expectations, or credits that ultimately transfer poorly or carry limited long-term value. The transcript line looks the same. The educational experience may not. And that creates a challenge because our public conversations around education increasingly revolve around metrics that are easy to count. How many students participated? How many credits were earned? How many degrees were completed? And how much money was saved? Now, those numbers are politically useful. They fit neatly into dashboards, rankings, press releases, and legislative talking points. But learning itself is much harder to quantify. Curiosity is harder to measure, intellectual confidence, growth in judgment, self-discovery, the ability to wrestle with ambiguity, all of those things are hard, if not sometimes seemingly impossible to measure. And yet, those may ultimately matter more than the number of transcript hours accumulated by age 18. One of the things I've observed repeatedly over the years with motivated students is that acceleration can produce two very different outcomes depending on how it's framed. I think at its best, acceleration creates freedom. Students gain flexibility, they gain confidence, they find room to explore more deeply. They gain opportunities to pursue research, study abroad, double majors, internships, entrepreneurship, creative work, or interdisciplinary interests. And so in that context, acceleration becomes expansive. But at its worst, acceleration can become almost purely transactional. Education starts turning into a kind of optimization puzzle where the primary goal is reducing friction and moving efficiently from credential to credential as quickly as possible. And I worry sometimes that students increasingly feel pressure to treat their adolescence that way. Not because they want to necessarily, but because the culture surrounding education subtly rewards it. There's a phrase I've used before that I think really applies here. That students are becoming increasingly fluent in how to perform achievement. Now, to be clear, performance has always existed in education to some degree. Students have always understood how to play the game, but the game itself has become more complex, accelerated, and publicly visible. Students today are often building professionalized academic identities remarkably early. By sophomore or junior year, many already feel pressure to demonstrate coherence, specialization, impact, leadership, and future direction, especially in the context of planning for highly selective college admissions. But I sometimes wonder what gets squeezed out in that process. Because historically, one of the most important functions of both high school and college was exploration. Trying things, changing directions, discovering unexpected interests, being uncertain, experimenting with identity, taking classes simply because they sounded fascinating. And most of all, learning without immediately asking how every single experience translates into marketable value. And increasingly, I'm not sure students feel like they have permission to do that anymore. One of the fascinating tensions in the current acceleration movement is that it's often framed as expanding opportunity, and don't get me wrong, in many ways it absolutely does. But I want to be very careful not to dismiss the enormous value of dual credit and early college programs can provide, especially for students from rural communities, low-income backgrounds, or first-generation college families. Expanded access to advanced learning matters deeply, but there's also a cultural shift happening simultaneously. Education is becoming increasingly compressed. The timeline shortens, the expectations arrive earlier, the resume building starts younger, the future feels closer all the time. And I think many students internalize the feeling that they are always behind unless they are actively accelerating toward something. That's a heavy psychological burden to place on adolescents, especially because some of the most transformational forms of learning are inherently inefficient. Think about it. Deep reading is inefficient. Creative exploration is inefficient. Research and its unclear outcomes at times is inefficient. Relationships are inefficient. Reflection is inefficient. Personal growth is both messy and inefficient. And yet, those experiences often shape who students become far, far more profoundly than simply accumulating another transferable course credit. One of the most interesting observations I've made over the years is that many students who enter college with extensive credits actually end up carving and craving more depth rather than less education. Once they get flexibility, they often use that freedom not to escape college quickly, but to engage more broadly and intentionally. And honestly, I think that may represent the healthiest possible vision of acceleration. Not acceleration as escape, but acceleration as expansion. That's a very different philosophy than the one dominating public conversations right now. Because the real value of advanced learning should not simply be by helping students finish faster. It should be helping students build larger intellectual and personal lives. And I think that's where the NACEP report offers an important warning. If policymakers, schools, and families focus too narrowly on the visible metrics of acceleration while neglecting quality, coherence, advising, and developmental purpose, we risk creating systems that look increasingly impressive statistically while becoming thinner educationally. Some students may accumulate more while experiencing less. And that possibility deserves much more attention than it currently receives. So next episode, I want to take this conversation even further by exploring a question that sits at the heart of all of this. If students are increasingly completing college-level work during high school, then what exactly is college supposed to become in the future? Because I think we may be watching the traditional boundary between secondary education and higher education slowly dissolve in real time.
A Slice with Dice is a production of Aldercube. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next time, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.